Well, g'day everyone. Welcome to Life in the Peloton. I'm Mitch Stocker, and this podcast this week is about Strava. Now, I'm assuming everyone listening to this knows what I'm talking about, but not necessarily. Look, since coming back to Australia and retiring as a pro, I had no need or the use to upload my rides to Training Peaks or some other coaching format, because at the end of the day, I'm doing it for myself. But the thing was, everyone kept hassling me, mate. Where's your ride mapped on Strava? How come you don't have a Strava account? So I was like, that's it. I'm getting an account. And I have since been discovering how to use it and how it works for me as a non-pro. Look, at the end of the day, it's a way to get some kudos on my rides, as they call it. This podcast this week has been no means sponsored by Strava of any sort. I thought, like myself, there's going to be some people out there who use it and be interested to find out the nuts and bolts, some hacks, hear how to use it to go pro and what the pros think of it. Do they use it? So I went away and I spoke to 3 riders who could give me that insight. Firstly, Mark O'Brien. Now, Mark O'Brien and I started riding together as a junior here in Victoria back in Australia in the early 2000s. We crossed paths on our way through the ranks till we rode together in Stravabut Porsche, my first professional team, you could call it, a pro-continental team here in Australia in 2007-2008 before I ventured off overseas. Mark himself has had a very colourful career, riding in and out of Australia in many teams. He was over in Malaysia, he was in the UK, but he's been mainly racing in Australia over those years. And this year, he was based in the squad in form TMX Make, a really successful team, if not the strongest team in Australia. So he's at the front end of the racing side. Aside from racing, Marco has a passion for training and coaching, and he's been a coach on HP Tech Coaching whilst he's been racing all these years, and he's also started working for Redine Australia, which is a commercial construction company, as a project manager. He's a man of many talents, as you can hear there, and the master of making the most of his time, especially when it comes to riding his bike. He was the perfect candidate when it came to understanding a tool like Strava. Next, I sat down with Jay Vine. Jay is in his second year in the World Tour, riding with Albertson de Koenig. He rode and finished his first Grand Tour, the Vuelta a España last year, and arguably used Strava as a tool to help him turn professional. And finally, I sat down with an old pro, George Bennett, a friend of mine who is riding in his 11th year as a pro, riding for UAE Team Emirates, and has actually clocked up 16 Grand Tours so far in his career. I was actually quite surprised about that when I looked back on that. I was like, holy hell. And I wanted to know what an older style pro who definitely didn't grow up with Strava and is actually now using it thought of it all. He was my insight into the Peloton and what they really thought about it. Did they actually care? The podcast this week is about understanding the community side of riding a bike. Sure, we're talking to the pros, but my view on Strava is about trying to connect with others, about where I ride, about where they ride, about trying to find out where everyone's riding, this community online. Something that I'm coming full circle with in my cycling life. That community, the love for just riding our bikes. Rapha has been such a fitting partner this year for Life in the Peloton. More than ever have I understood the principles and the vision of what they're trying to actually achieve there at Rapha. Rapha Cycling Club, the RCC, it's a great community where riders of all levels, skills and ability have that common interest in cycling, are brought together in such an inclusive, fun way. And I've really enjoyed being taken under the fold of the RCC this year and meeting heaps of awesome people. Now guys, on to this episode. Like I've said, I've broken it into 3 parts. We're going to hear from Marco first, Mark O'Brien that is. He's going to run us through the nuts and bolts. Then we're going to hear from Jay Vine, the master of Strava, I think. And finally from the old pro George. So guys, sit back and enjoy. All right, Mark O'Brien, we're here and we're talking about Strava. Welcome to the podcast, mate.
Thanks, Docs. Long-time listener, first-time caller. It's pretty exciting to be here, I must say.
Well, we've known each other for quite a long time, right back when we started in juniors. We're back here in Melbourne, in Australia, and we rode together, in Stravabut Porsche also. We've ridden together for a lot of our life, and now we've sort of come full circle. We're back here together. Not that we've ever come out of touch over those years, but I've sort of been traveling a bit. You've been doing your own ambitions as well as a cyclist, and also outside of cycling now you've got yourself actually a proper job, haven't you?
Yeah, mate. You could say we had slightly different trajectories in the cycling space, but so I had a few adventures traveling around. But obviously, you've had a very successful cycling career, and I'm just a mad cycling fan and enjoy riding my bike. So now both of us back here, dads, and enjoy riding our bikes still. And as you said, I'm doing a normal person job as well as my other cycling endeavours.
Don't downplay your cycling career, because there's a specific reason why I've chosen you for today, because it may have not happened on the actual racing front per se, but you are one of the strongest guys that I know out on the bike, and you're a guy who's mastered training, in my opinion, not only for yourself, but now as a coach. And we're talking about Strava. Marco, what is Strava?
So, it's actually not a bad tool in terms of looking how you go against a pro, but it could be anyone. It could be someone that's just commuting to work and go, you know what? I don't think anyone's ever been as fast as me between this traffic light and that traffic light. And if you've ever commuted into the city, mate, like, they are rapid. So you just see guys just sprinting a certain, let's say, 100-meter stretch, or the up and down your street, for example. You might think no one else has ridden this. I'm going to be the fastest person who's ever gone from the top of your court back down. And you can make that a segment on Strava. And then from that point on, anyone that rides that segment, it'll compare their time to your time. And you can see how you can compare to every single person that goes through that.
In the world, really, essentially.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's also an amazing tool for when you're traveling around the world. If you're lucky enough to have your bike with you, you go, I have no idea. I'm in Istanbul. This is a real life example for when I actually was in Istanbul. And I've gone, I have no idea where to go, but I kind of want to stay fit because I've got some racing coming up. Go on Strava, look where locals have ridden, or like there's actually heat maps. You can see the most used segments and used roads. In a city of 20 million people, it's still, you're putting your life in your hands. But yeah, you can go find the local hills, climbs, get your training done. Got chased by a few rabid dogs, but that's another story. But moral story is you can basically find your way no matter where you are in the world, and also see how you compare to the local Turkish cyclists.
Well, that's right. There is that racing element to it. But if, we're talking about, we can get into that in a minute. We're talking about segments or KOMs or whatever you want to call. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the thing that I've realized is, because when I came back to Australia, look, I was never involved with Strava as a pro. I didn't have any need for it, I didn't think. I had my database, upload my training peaks, my coach would check it. But once I wasn't a pro, I was like, well, I still felt the need to upload my file somewhere. Get this kudos, as they call it in Strava. Someone give me like a little thumbs up, used to be my coach, or he'd give me a thumbs down sometimes. Someone to just sort of give me recognition for the work I'd done. And people kept asking me, how come you don't have Strava? Where are you riding? So it was like this, from what I can say is, and you can maybe tell me differently, is that it was this place where it was like a cycling Facebook where people could see what I'd done, give me a kudos, and also it was me to sort of track and show people, hey, this is a great ride. Go and check it out. Or I was talking about the ride. Look, where is it? Check my Strava out. Go and have a look where it is. So there was this database where people could actually see it.
Yeah, I think training historically was always a really secretive thing. And even before, like we've ridden when it was basically training off heart rate, or even before that, you'd be doing your real perceived effort. And so every year, I think, well, every few years, it sort of advances that little bit more. And I think now that you've got something like Strava, as you said, you're no longer a pro cyclist. You don't have Kev watching over every movement. And it's kind of, it almost keeps you accountable, I think. Like if you're uploading to Strava, people get to say, oh yeah, Mitch is keeping fit, or like you're out for a run. All of a sudden in the back of your mind, you're going, hang on, there's people following me. I wonder, I don't really want to just like dawdle around. You still have a bit of pride about you. You've been a pro for 10, 15 years or whatever it is. Like you still have a bit of stubbornness about you, and want to show that you're still a strong rider or a strong runner when you're out for a run. And I think this is almost a thing to keep you accountable, keeps you linked up with your mates, because someone will see it and might comment on it or go, that's a great loop. I'm going to go try that because Mitch went and rode it. And it's almost a way of connecting with people, and probably is a little bit like the Rapha clubhouse stuff that you've often spoken about. It's almost like having a community no matter where you go, that if you go overseas and go ride your bike, you can link up with a local group, see where they leave from, see where they go, meet new friends. Like, there's a lot of social parts about it as well, not just the competitive side of Strava.
And I was thinking about the ego side of it. It's like, well, we're essentially just pumping up our own ego. Hey, check out this awesome ride I did, and I'm so good, I did this ride. But at the end of the day, is that bad that we're sort of, pushing ourselves to show we're exercising? And I was like, well, hang on. It's not like on, say, Instagram where you're just like, look at me, I look so cool. It's like, well, look at the ride I did. Look at the training I'm doing. yes, okay, you're pumping up your own ego, but actually you're still doing the training, aren't you?
Yeah, well, that's it. Like, you still got to do. It's still hard,
Yeah.
no matter what you do. But like, I'm an absolute fiend for external validation, mate. So I thrive on it. Yeah, like if you can do a really good ride and get on there and like you're checking in and getting the updates of so and so's commented or giving you kudos, it's great. It's an amazing feeling, and it almost pushes you to keep wanting to do it as well. It's like a addictive drug. The more you get, and you're like, oh, that was quite good. Maybe I'll try to go another segment here, another segment there, and as I said, there is a sense of pride about it as well as the sense of community as well.
Well, let's talk about the segments now, because people out there are probably wondering, what the hell are they talking about? Segments, KOMs? So like you explained at the start, you can go out there and you can go, you know what, this hill. Let's talk about King Lake, because, everyone listening out there, they're going to know about that, or anyone in Melbourne will. That was my old stomping ground. You know it very well now since moving to Melbourne, probably 10 years ago now, I guess. It's a very well-known climb, and you can go, I'll put a segment from the very bottom of that to the very top, and it'll record everyone going over that. And ultimately, that'll become a KOM. And if you are the fastest person up there through GPS, it's going to track you, and therefore you're going to get a crown and you're going to be the fastest person. Years ago, there's an old wives' tale around, who's done the fastest up there? I think William Walker did 15 minutes up there. Oh, yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
It was sort of cool as mystique, but now we've actually got the official records, and there's millions of those segments all over, everywhere.
Yep.
Tell me about KOMs, Marco.
King Lake or even the 1 and 20, they're both great examples. So 1 and 20, I think it has every 500 meter segments on there that someone's gone, you know what, I was pretty speedy in that bit. There's a bit of a tailwind. I did a bit of a sprint. I reckon I might have been the fastest. Bang, new segment. Might have Doc's kilometer on there, like whatever it is. They've got so many different ways to break up a hill, but also, as you said, there's often at the bottom and at the top of the hill, and you can not only compare yourself to everyone else, but compare yourself to yourself. It'll give you your best times that you've ever done up there, and you go, oh, I did a PB, and this is something I use with my athletes with coaching as well, that it might be, well, maybe you're not going to go and take Alpe d'Huez KOM, but you can go and say, all right, I want to try to beat my best ever time Alpe d'Huez. Go, time yourself, and it's there. Whereas back in the day, as you said, there was this mystique. It could have been Willie Walker or Trent Lowe. That I hear they did it on mountain bike tires, and like with a full saddlebag, and yet they did this time, and everyone would talk it up. And then it went. I think it was Cycle to Max was the next thing, where you actually could go and manually input your time, and it'd tell you what your VAM was, your vertical centimeters on your way up there. Which obviously people always put a little bit of spice on top of their time, and it's not necessarily the right thing. Whereas in the days of GPS, said you compare yourself to yourself, you can compare yourself to your mates, and then compare yourself to every single other person that's ever been up that road. So it is a amazing way to want to push yourself and go that bit faster.
Well, let's talk about taking comms. So is there a trick to the trade? Is there special ways you can go about trying to take these comms? Because anyone's who's seen this, they obviously try to master it. What are the tricks, Marco? I know you're a bit of a comm hunter, and I love that word because they're hunters. They chuck their hunter hat on. They go out there, they search for comms where people, haven't particularly put a fast time in, and they get the crown. They've got their name on number one position. What's comm hunting about? How do you take KOMs?
Well, I used to poo-poo this quite a bit, mate, when I was taking my cycling a bit more serious, whereas then as it went on and on, I was like, it'd actually be kind of cool if people in Melbourne knew I was the fastest on so-and-so segment. So then, so it began. It'd be just so happened there was a strong southerly wind. Oh, yeah, it's not a bad day. Head out to King Lake. And that's probably number one is the wind. The wind. The wind is key. If you got a tailwind, then you're in with a show. Get out there. You want to ditch off any excess weight. No need for those extra bottles. You can take the risk, get rid of spare tubes if you really want to, and faster wheels. It used to be that thing that you'd never go train on carbons, whereas basically everyone's on carbons now, where it used to be your 32 spoke wheels and, the old gator skin tires or the armadillos I've got on my bike at the moment. But now you're chucking a bit of if you think you're on, faster tires. And then the big one that no one really thinks about is the air pressure side of things as well. Yeah, that's probably
you go that far, do you?
Well, if you want to take it very seriously, mate, I may have a little peek at it every now and then. But I know, for example, when Wiggo did his hour record, I think he was hoping for air pressure in the 980 or so. I think it was about a bit over 1,000. I think they worked out that difference would be about another 500 or 600 meters on his time there, which would have had him over 55k. So it's pretty significant the amount of difference it would make. Or King Lake, I'd say yeah, that's sort of like 20 or 30 seconds on your effort there for the exact same watts. So those would be the obvious ones. Wind, losing excess weight, and then if you want to take it that little bit more seriously, looking at the air pressure.
And it's supposed to be all done individually, isn't it? You know, you're not supposed to be paced by mates and all that sort of stuff, are you?
No, not particularly. But then also the racing is allowed to go on roads, and then no one ever really flags a race. But then you may get flagged, or motor pacing definitely is a no-no. Whereas I think the old lead out, or just being a bit tactical, that if you had, for example, if you're going out and doing a maximum 5-minute effort, I may just slot on the rear wheel for a little bit and continue on if I can hold your shoe. But yeah, I think it's becoming less and less frowned upon, because of course you have bunch rides that swap off for segments, and then it is interesting, especially the uphill ones where people have a stronger opinion, where I think just random segments out and about, if you happen to be chopping off with a mate at the time, then so be it. If you're fast, then you get the crown.
Well, let's put your coaching hat on now, and talking about KOMs and talking about Strava in general. What do you think? You know, is this something that you like to see your athletes doing? You know, go out there, hunt these comms? Because ultimately, when I think back to training, most of my schedules, and I think, I probably had a lot of comms back in my day if I had Strava when I was really training. But actually, when I was training, I never really went to the full, to the top of the climb. I probably turned around and did 5 times repeats on, a part of a climb. I never completed the whole climb, say. So actually, when I think about that, if you've got athletes and they're just going out there going, well, my 10-minute effort finishes, half a kilometer before the top of this climb, I'm actually just going to push on and try and take the Strava. And next thing you know, they're going harder than they need to. How does that go when you're training guys, aspiring pros, I guess, or young guys, or maybe old guys, I don't know, people who want to just sort of chase these Stravas? Is that good for training?
I remember actually training with Brendan Canty back in the day, and he used to love his Strava hunting, and he was absolutely baffled when we're going up King Lake, and I was doing a 15-minute effort that we're not far from the top, and I just stopped. He's like, what are you doing? There's only a few hundred meters to go. And I was like, I had a 15-minute effort. Yeah, whereas now, most definitely, I'd say it's worthwhile pushing on, because, yeah, I had an athlete doing 3x20s, for example, and they happened to go that tiny bit longer to do a PB, and it gave them a lot of confidence and, that really good feeling about themselves that wants them to push themselves that little bit further. I think there's merit in it. I think there's an issue when it was meant to be an easy day and they happen to go sprint up a hill, which occasionally I'd see that it's a recovery day, but they've hit, a minute at 700 watts or something like that. I'm like, well, that's not good for training.
Did they get the comm? And you go, look, wasn't good for training, but well done.
It's like training's temporary, but like Strava lasts forever. So I think it has its place, mate. Like I think when you look at it, and if I got an athlete, for example, whether it's someone that wants to be professional or just someone that wants to go and beat their mates, if they had maximal efforts and chasing a Strava that's only a minute longer than I prescribed, still hitting the same zones that I was after anyway. But then on top of that, they've probably actually pushed themselves harder than they would have if they were just going up a hill 5 minutes and turning around and going up and down. If they've had something to chase, even if it's an extra 30 seconds or a minute, one, they're stoked because they've got a comm, and two, they've probably pushed themselves harder than they would have without it, so they probably get better training adaptation. So I think on certain days, and this is something that I've started doing with athletes as well, I will give them a Strava hunting day, knowing that it might be a 5-minute effort plus a 10-minute effort or something along the way. It might be a downhill segment they want to go rip, but they'll have fun. They'll hopefully get a couple of comms or at least PBs. So that'll have them. And it's not so rigid and structured as going out and doing 5x5s, 3x20s. It's like a bit more of a laugh with your mates and going, we'll go race up here. And I think a secondary benefit of that as well, in Australia now particularly, for guys that want to make it pro, we don't really have any uphill finishes. And with that, if someone can come out and do the local climb, whether it's King Lake or Donabuang, and do really impressive numbers and get up there, I think teams will actually look at them. So even if they're trying to get in not a world tour team, obviously, it's not that level, but at least get the opportunity through an NRS team to go maybe do a Sun Tour or something like that, and then they get to show themselves. So I think there is an exposure side to it as well. And if you went to Girona and you went and took down one of the comms, then all of a sudden people talking, going, well, this guy can go uphill. No one's going to sign you from that, but maybe you'll get interest to go test with a team or something like that to open up doors that wouldn't have been possible for someone that's just fast uphill, but not actually, well, especially in Australia, like good at racing crits or sprinting and what our racing's dominated by.
It's an extra piece to the puzzle, isn't it? It's not the whole entire thing. And you think back to when we were trying to become professional, and like we said, the mystique of, it was word of mouth, and it was a different time. I'm not talking about, back in the day,
dinosaurs.
But, yeah, we are, essentially. But, it was different, and, different times, and again, okay, yes, it does give you more exposure and potentially, let's say, easier to get seen, but that also means it's easier for a lot more people to be seen. So you think back to our time, not that long ago, 20 years ago, it was more difficult to get noticed, but if you did get noticed, there was a smaller pool, So I guess it's got its pluses and minuses. And on that same note, what I want to also ask you about, because this is something I'm finding myself falling into the trap of, is you set this standard for yourself, whether that's running, whether that's riding, it's public. Before, it was just my coach and I never really wanted to let him down in terms of that's the training you set, they're the numbers I have to try and achieve, but it was between him and I. Now suddenly it's like I feel this pressure to perform for the world, who's watching, and at the end of the day, probably no one really cares, but you think this inside, I'm sure you do too. There's no easy rides. You've got this standard that people you think are expecting to see. What do you think about that?
There's a massive internal dialogue, especially if I'm out riding just on my own. Because at least if I'm with someone else, I'm like, oh yeah, but I was riding with them, Whereas if I'm on my own, I'm having a shocker. I'm just like, oh geez, this hurts my morale. I think I'll just leave it private.
Yeah,
a lot of the time I will, just in case I'm working on riding on work time.
I didn't even know you could do that. What can you do?
Yeah, I just haven't set it private, mate. So that that's why if you're having that internal battle with yourself, going, I am creeping today. I don't want people to see I've done this. But then I guess you're torn as well because you will get a couple of kudos nonetheless. You just say, oh, easy ride or something like that. I'll just leave it on private, especially through winter now, the full winter setup. I've been, a lot of mine just left on private because I'm just so appalled with my average speeds on rides.
And who's even looking at that? Really, I know we think that, but I sort of like this. It is a positive thing for you to push, but I guess then going back to the coaching question, how do you do that with athletes? This internal push is like you said, hey, stick to the program, mate. Don't worry about the Strava.
Yeah, well, that's the big thing. To be honest with you, I think this is something that's developed over years and years for someone like you and I, been around a long time, and therefore, I guess you have an expectation of what you think people perceive you as. Whereas I think for younger guys, that's not such an issue, or people just getting into it because they haven't had this bar they've set in their head. They know they ride at this level. And then all of a sudden it's like you're not going that well, but you kind of feel like you should still be at a certain level. So I think it's more something that be developed over years. Whereas my younger guys, they don't really look at it. If they get a comm, they're stoked, but they're not so much worried about trying to keep, X amount of average watts or average speed or anything like that. So they do just get on with it, with the occasional little sprint here or there where they race their mate or go for a little short segment. Yeah, but a vast majority, they're just, stick to it. Whereas I think, as you said, someone that's been quite strong in previous years, I think they are the ones that have that internal battle going, oh, I feel like I'm really creeping and don't want people to see it.
Damaging my reputation, my legacy.
Exactly.
So there's all talking about comms as well. Lastly, I guess, one thing I wanted to touch on is there's also this thing called flagging. And we did talk about that with motor pacing. There is an ability, and look, I'm a bit of a go-mad at this, so everyone's probably listening to this going, yeah, mate, you're explaining stuff to us that we all know, but I just want to go through it with Marco because he's one of the veterans of Strava. When we were out riding, he was telling me all different things about it, and I was learning it. I learned that you can actually put the KOMs, a counter on your head unit, so you can see as you're riding along. I'll let you explain that too, but before we explain that, let's talk about flagging. And have you ever been flagged or have you ever flagged someone? So explain what that is, and have you ever gotten a heated discussion about it online?
So flagging is basically if you have seen, for example, if someone went and took my Mount William Colm in the Grampians, I'd be flagging that bad boy straight away. No one touches my Halls Gap Cup. No, it's just if you think that someone has been motor pacing or they're driving or whatever it may have been when they've gone over your segment or someone else's segment, for example, you can flag it and then Strava will go have a look at it and go, yep, the power doesn't align with what's happened there. And then they hide it. So it's hidden away and no longer counted on the leaderboard. And then if you're the one that's been flagged, you can go in and go, mate, I was just flying. Like, you're just jealous. and you can contest it if you want to.
Oh, right, you can.
Yeah, you can, and try to justify it, and then they'll put it back up there.
What happens if you don't have any power on?
Then they can just assume you're driving. So if someone flags that you don't really have a leg to stand on.
Ah, right.
So it's more like if you're motor pacing, it's quite obvious. Maybe someone is not happy. As I said, if you've rolled turns with someone else and taken their comm, maybe they'll get angry or a race. But largely it's just motor pacing, I think, or someone that's accidentally left their head unit rolling when they put it on the car roof and started driving home. So you get someone going up a mountain at 60k an hour. Yeah, but I haven't actually. I may have been flagged once when I've just had a motor pacing session that was uploaded, but I don't think I got any juicy comms that day. It was more just a random one between St Andrews and Hurstbridge or something like that. That someone's obviously had a good tailwind and had a good crack at, and they're a bit angry about. But there's definitely a few that have been flagged on and off. I know the Freddie Ovet 1 in 20 time that a lot of people thought wasn't possible. That one copped a few on and off the flaggings over the year.
And what happened?
It was actually being beaten now, but that was by a few buddies and myself when we were chopping off back in maybe December. And I think Liam Johnson now has the comm up there, one of the Inform boys, by 1 second. So that was a good one. But yeah, it was a chop off with a few of us. So once again, people might be a bit angry about the traditionalist Strava followers, but it is what it is. He's now the fastest ever up there.
Well, that's the thing. Like, there is a bit of a, what do they mean in the world? They mean something. Like you said, that it's like you said, it's a database where people can see, one, have fun with it, but two, on the very pointy end, test yourself against the pros. And like, this is something I continually debate about, what's happening in the World Tour at the moment is these strong guys are getting a chance to come straight into the World Tour through systems like Strava, through systems like Zwift, because their power is available. We can see these engines, and teams go, well, let's just give him a chance. I don't care if he can race or not. I can see his engine as strong as Chris Froome or as strong as Tadej Pogacar or, whoever it is, Jonas Vingegaard. But let's get him in and let's just see if they can race in the World Tour. Well, that doesn't work. You need to learn how to race first. But they mean something on the world stage, don't they?
It's starting to happen. Probably while there's more crashes now in the World Tour as well. But people, instead of coming through the normal path of track or obviously CX overseas, it's more now down to the numbers. And people go, oh, you can do this. I'm like, but the bloke's never finished a race. It's like, oh, but he's done this time. And I think for just guys like myself even, I think it's still fun to go up a climb and go, wow, I've within X amount of, George Bennett or a Jay Vine who's ripped up a climb before, and you've gone, wow, I'm actually not too far off them, or they did this watts per kilo. And I think that's an exciting thing. It's almost making it so you can compare yourself to the best in the world. If they've gone and done a test up a climb and you do it, now everyone knows what numbers they're doing. They can estimate the watts per kilo. It's really cool. I think when the pro guys leave their numbers public as well, because that sort of gives you something more to work towards. And you're like, wow, it's actually, for a young guy particularly, if you look at it and go, oh, Pogacar did this up this climb and I was only 2 minutes slower, and then you want to get better and better, it kind of gives you a bit of, a feeling that you could possibly get there. Or on the other hand, just go, wow, those guys are phenomenal. Like how good they actually are. Like when you see them doing, 6.3, 6.4 watts per kilo up the final climb after 4 alpine climbs beforehand. And
whatever stages beforehand.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's all this side of things. And you go, I can do 6.3 for 20 minutes. But as I know from the reality of being over there, you've sprinted out of 100 corners all day. You're 4th position. You've gone up other climbs at threshold or above. And then the best guys can come out and still do numbers better than your standard rider at the end of the day. And that's what is pretty phenomenal. But also, I think Strava's great at sort of letting you know the level between where you are now and then how damn good the pros are.
What do you hate about Strava then?
Bit of a tough one, actually. I think originally I didn't like the competitive side, or that it was taken away from training sessions and everything like that. Now it's probably just someone stealing my comm, to be honest, Docs. Like I think, there's not so much a dislike about it. I don't think there's too many negatives on it now, at least from where I stand as a coach and also as a avid cyclist. I think it's more positive now. I said there's a whole bunch of community, testing yourself, pushing yourself harder, maybe exposure for young guys. There's a lot of things, or even just to get you up to go and try to beat your own PB. There's mainly positives, whereas the negatives, it probably is just pushing too hard, maybe people racing down descents and doing silly things. I think that can be where you can run into issues. And I know there's been some pretty nasty crashes over the years of people just trying to beat their time on a descent. That side's probably not amazing, but I think overall it outweighs and it's more positive than negative.
That was my next question. What do you love about Strava? But you more or less wrapped it up there. Is there anything else you want to sort of add in there on your loves for it?
I'd love to get more comms. Yeah, go Chase. I think, there's still a few more around. I think we've chatted before about you riding around Lancefield and almost having like a pride around trying to take the local comms. And whenever anyone enters your avenue, they're just like, oh yeah, this is Mitch's.
That idea's drifted very quickly.
Years, mate. You missed too many of your best years of going and hunting and making it your little hood where anyone comes in there knows that it's your territory and to stay out.
I realise that idea is much too hard. I'm never going to be able to achieve that goal. But, mate, well, thanks for that. Giving us a little insight to, the reality of Strava. Everyone on the ground, from an amateur to a professional to a coach to just an everyday Joe Blow riding to work. I think you sort of cover all those realms. Now, let's hear from two pros about Strava as well. Here we are, Jay Vine. Now, I've spoken to the Gomads of the world, Mark O'Brien. Now I'm speaking to a new pro, Jay Vine, who is ripping it up in the Peloton, but a guy, in my opinion, who has actually used Strava in a way to become pro. I'm not going to say entirely, but has actually used it as a tool, in his way to become professional. Jay, welcome to the podcast. Mate, let's talk about Strava and let's talk about the way that you actually have used it in a way through your progression to become professional as a bit of a tool to become professional.
Yeah, I mean, I've never known a world in cycling without Strava, really. So I've always used Strava from day dot, pretty much. The funny thing is, it's as in the last 2 years since turning pro, the whole KOM hunting sort of aspect has disappeared because I used to do that in Australia a lot, waiting for the good days with the good tailwinds and stuff like that. But after turning pro, you are a lot more structured in your workouts. I don't know about for you, Mitch, when you first started, but if training was like super duper structured or if you had a bit more leeway, but I might not get a free ride where it's go all out for 20 minutes or go all out for 5 minutes. It's, there's blocks and you might be having to hold back for a 5-minute effort because you've got to do 5 of them, for example. I'm not sure where your experience is with that is, but the way I use Strava now has changed a lot. And it's now more just this is how many kilometers I'm doing. This is the route that I did. And here's a cool view from that ride. It's very, very Facebooky, Instagrammy, crossovery type thing.
I guess the question for me is to you, were you able to use Strava in a way to become professional? Were you able to use it to analyze what the pros were doing or what you were doing and sort of look at the data and go, you know what, I'm going up, Wollonga Hill or whatever hill it might be in Australia and go, I'm pushing 6 point whatever watts per kilo up this climb. Hang on, this is pretty good. I might be able to match the pros here. Were you able to use that in a way as a tool to understand your level?
I think yes, in the sense that it was also interesting because you could choose your best possible scenario for no bottles early on in the ride and good conditions. But a lot of the KOMs where I was aiming for, they were done in groups. Like they were in race conditions. So whole width of the road, Peloton drafting, that sort of thing. So it was interesting to sort of compare yourself against a group of cyclists in race conditions, but also as you're starting off as, I guess I wasn't a junior, I was an old junior. As you're starting off in cycling, understanding, okay, if I increase power, this is how much faster I can go, and where you can get how you can tune your body for your type of riding to get better on climbs, on flats on descents, where you get the most bang for your buck out of, weight loss, power gain, how to make a road straight, take the straightest line through corners, stuff like that. So, yeah.
When you eventually went professional and you got to experience, come over to, say, Girona, a hub of a lot of professionals and a lot of good quality climbs and a lot of guys where you think at the top level testing themselves on these climbs, whether they had Strava accounts or not. And one thing I noticed about you, and a big reason why I've chose you for this podcast, is you started ticking off these climbs. Rocacorba, Amir. God, I've even forgotten the climbs. Els Angels. God, I've forgotten. I've been out of there for 6 months, forgotten the climbs. You started ticking these climbs off, and even me without a Strava account, I started hearing about it. Who's this Jay Vine guy? He's taken all the Stravas from the good pros. So was that became a bit of a focus for you to sort of test yourself against the existing records to go, hey guys, just remember who I am, or just acknowledge who I am, because I'm at actually the world level. What do they really mean in the world? What do they mean in the world of pro cycling? Was that something that you were going out to show people?
I mean, for the first two, Amir and Rocacorba, they were done in the first 3 or 4 weeks of me getting to Girona. And I was sort of coming through the academy the way I came through, and being neo-pro on the team, it was sort of me just trying to wave my hand in the air to try and get a selection for a race, because I hadn't had a calendar brought out yet. So I sort of I think I literally brought up the Strava heat map and went, oh, there's some dark blue lines on these two climbs. They're long. They're suit for where I'm currently sitting in my sort of training plan at the moment. And I went and did Amir for the first KOM, and took the com, and all of a sudden started getting messages on Instagram going, what the hell was that? Like, where'd you come from?
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh yeah, I'm feeling good. I've got a bit of a free week. Have you got any other suggestions? And then I just started getting these messages pouring, and like, you should take Rocacorba, and Els Angels. It's been held by Levi Leipheimer for like 15 years or something. So yeah, then I just started ticking them off. And
do you have the backside of Rocacorba? Do you have the backside of Els Angels?
Yeah, the one from the Madrena side, yeah.
You do. You beat Levi, because that is a ridiculously fast time up there.
Yeah. I think I took 15 seconds off him or something.
Wow.
I did get a lead out from my wife for the base. So she did do the first 30 seconds. But that's the rest of it was me.
Well, tell me about this. Let's talk about actually taking comms now. When you talk about comms, what is the easiest way to do it? Is it, for you, is it taking a long KOM? Is it taking a short KOM? How do you go about these? And when you see them, how do you go about them? What are the tricks to the trade? What works for you?
I particularly like sort of longer, medium sort of KOMs, especially between 8 or 7 minutes to just over 20 minutes is sort of the best option, because once you get longer than that, wind is very, very fickle in comm business. And if your climb is longer than 25 minutes, it's probably going to go through a few layers of altitude and also wind conditions. But also, it's not useful for training as such. Like, I've rarely done a race where I've been able to pace exactly the way I want to on a climb. You've always got attacks going on. There are surges. There are times where you're not pedaling because you're trying to move out and around through a bunch, even going uphill. You might go faster in the race, but the power graph is all these sort of things. So
up and down, what you're explaining, yeah.
Exactly, up and down. So that's where my training doesn't usually provide me the fastest times up climbs compared to how I used to use Strava back in Australia, where I'd go, I'm going to try and do 7.5 minutes full gas up this climb to take the KOM. Whereas now, it might take me 8 minutes, but the normalized power might be higher than previous. So.
Well, tell me about that. So entering the World Tour, it's a pretty big step, and I'm not going to say that entirely Strava was the step for you, but it was an element of it. You were able to show who you were at the top level against the top names. You're talking about Levi Leipheimer, a well-known name. That's just one once you became in Girona, but I'm sure there's many others that I don't know about. The difference between, like you've just explained now, taking comms on your own, KOMs, out when you want the conditions to be right, when you're controlling the power, and suddenly racing. Let's talk about those two different beasts. And actually now you've been able to come in, because a lot of guys now, and this is something I talk about a lot on the podcast or wherever I'm talking, is that there's a lot of guys who come in with the engines like yourself, but now it's the racecraft. How have you handled that racecraft in terms of, hang on, I've actually got the power. I know I've got the power. I've seen the data. I've competed against guys like Levi Leipheimer or Ryder Hagedell or whoever it may be. Hang on, I'm in this race now. Technically, I should be doing exactly what they can do because I know I've got the legs. How have you caught up with the racecraft? Has that been something you've had to really go, oh, actually, this is a whole different ball game now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's a massive tactical side to the way my dad likes to say it is he likes to say it's basically the bicycle riding isn't actually part of your job anymore. It's you're playing chess. Bicycling is not actually it should be second nature. Putting the power out should be second nature. You're tactically trying to win the race because unless you're one of the freaks in our sport who can do everything, everyone's on a very similar level. So you've got to tactically try and beat them by saving energy throughout the race, drafting at the right moment, not attacking as you go into a 4% section of a climb, forcing your opponent to do a little bit more work by bluffing. There's a bit of poker in there as well. And I think similar to other sports where, like in NRL, I'm sure they watch the game, their opponents playing the game before they play on Friday night or whatever it is. I do a lot of that myself. I've watched basically every minute of the Tour de France when I haven't been riding, especially in breakaway situations, to try and learn, all right, this is what tactics he employs. This is how I can use that tactic. And, oh, look at that. That's how he looks when he's on his limit, stuff like that. And then also learning tricks from the riders that do well and how group dynamics work in when they're chasing solo riders, stuff like that. That's watching the actual bicycle races has been a very big part of my learning curve.
What are the KOMs or the comms, Strava comms? What do they really mean in the World Tour? Do pros actually give a shit about them? Like when, I obviously do because I've contacted you, and I knew that you took these serious mountain KOMs in Girona because I've tested myself up all these climbs. I thought, who is this guy, Jay Vine? He must be a freak because, I'm going up these climbs and they're really tough. In your opinion, you think like, yeah, okay, I'm doing something good here. I'm actually taking off all the big guys from these climbs. But from your understanding, do they actually mean anything once you get into the World Tour? Do guys care about that? Do they give you the respect?
It's funny. The results on the super famous climbs like Alpe d'Huez, Ventoux, Stelvio Pass, for example, I think getting a race result on those mean obviously far more than a Strava KOM ever does. But the Strava KOMs that mean the most, I believe, in the World Tour are the ones like Rocacorba, like Amir, that don't have races go up them, that everyone trains on, like Cortals in Andorra or Bexiel's just down the road from me, or Col di Ordino. There's probably, I think, 100 cyclists in Andorra now, and they're used basically every day by at least 4 of us. They mean much, much more.
Do you have the comms on them?
No, not yet. I once again haven't had the chance to put a 30-minute effort out yet.
I love it. Not yet. Yeah.
Not yet. Yes. fingers crossed. But I think those climbs are, because they're your local climbs, even though it's not your country of origin, they're your local training grounds. But that's what I think is much more sought after by the pros. Yeah.
What do you love about Strava in terms of the whole process, the whole technology of it, whether it's the comms, whether it's, showing where you ride? What do you love about the whole system of Strava?
Since turning pro and especially moving around the world, like I've never been to Europe before turning pro, finding pro riders, having a look at their routes around where I'm going to be going or living, and using the heat maps function, being able to see what they're doing in terms of duration, water stops, for example, trying to find water that you don't have to go to a service station every hour and a half like you do at the moment in 38 degrees. Like those functionalities are pretty damn useful. And I find finding B roads as well, not having to take the main highway road all the time is also another big positive. Like I guess before Strava, you'd have to get out a map, to try and find these small roads. And the map might not show that, this road is practically plowed. Whereas, if you bring it up on Strava and you see that it's had 1,000 cyclists go through it this year already, well, it's obviously pretty good. So
what do you hate about Strava? If there's anything that you don't like, is there anything that you don't like about using Strava? Seeing your data up there, critical comments, whatever. What is it? Do you feel it's pressure sometimes because you're putting it up on Strava? You have to put out a good performance because suddenly, like now, the world's checking in on you. This sort of pressure that you have, this level that you want to show the world. So suddenly you can't put out a weak performance. Is that a negative for you, or is there any other negative of using Strava in your opinion?
I don't really see it that way. I think the biggest negative, and it's not really a negative for me, it's more a negative for other people looking in at pros data, is trying to copy, for example, like trying to, but like not necessarily copy the route or the training session that you're doing, but over time, if an amateur tries to do what a professional does, they're gonna cook themselves, and it's you see the same with people trying to do weird diets, to try and get that six watts per kilo for 5 minutes or whatever they're trying to aim for. That's where having a coach is much more valuable than trying to copy a Strava professional, because you're going to get much more enjoyment out of your riding by doing it that way.
What about the coaching side? Like, what does your coach think? Let's think of it in two different parts. Before you're professional, when you're back in Australia, and now you're professional, maybe like you already alluded to it, that you're not chasing the comms as much these days, but beforehand you were. Was your coach like, this is beneficial, go out and chase comms? Or like, Jay, you've got to stop chasing those comms. It's not fitting the program. I want you to do a threshold effort, and suddenly you're just going, actually, I'm about 30 seconds off this comm. I'm just going to go for it. Where does it fit in a training level, in a coaching perspective? Is it a good thing? Have you been pulled up by your coach going, Jay, stop, get off Strava because you're chasing comms all the time. I need you to stick to a training program.
My coach likes to just let me off the chain, as you probably did in the lead up to races. You finally get a chance to, have a bit of a taper. But me personally, I don't like going into a race super fresh. So I will get a couple of days before the race, get told, okay, you've got 2.5 hours, just go nuts. Don't go crazy, but go nuts on a couple
take the comms, but don't take them by too much.
Yeah. Oh, it's don't be doing an hour threshold effort and stuff like that. But just go do a couple of squeezes, stuff like that. But it's like unstructured type stuff. He likes using it for that aspect. Back in Australia, before I turned pro, he was all for it. He would my coach back in Australia would try and incorporate as much KOMing as possible, because you're not getting paid back in Australia. The enjoyment factor, like I'm paying my coach and he wants to try and keep me happy as much as he wants me to see me improve. So, I'd often get the response back of, if I asked, okay, can I tailor my effort to, can I do 8 minutes, then 4 and 4 and 4, instead of doing the 5 4s, I'd just add 2 4s together. And he'd be like, yeah, if you want, the rest of the session's going to hurt more, but okay, fine. So yeah, that's how that would go, sort of thing. Yeah.
Well, tell me about, lastly, if you have a KOM, a Strava, you've got a mountain preem or whatever you want to call it, a KOM, and someone takes it, does that sort of, churn with you? You get that email on your account, your com has been taken, your KOM has been taken by Mitch Stocker, and you're thinking, what the hell? What's going on here? Does that piss you off? Does that change what your next day is going to be? Do you want to go out there and get it again? What's your feeling when your com gets taken?
I could probably count on one hand the ones that I genuinely really care about.
What are they? Give me them.
Okay. So there'd be Black Mountain in Canberra.
Yep. Mount
Ainslie in Canberra. Rockacorba in Girona. Amir in Girona. And Backside L's Angels. That's pretty nostalgic, I tell you. That one, I can't believe you've got that from Levi Lifetime, because that was done in Vuelta Catalunya, and I never thought that was going to be broken. Honestly, I didn't even know you had it. I didn't think that could be broken. Yeah, and that's probably the final one. But those, and I think what comes down to it is those were planned. Those were. I was feeling that they're some of my best performances, like for the time durations that I've done. And like, I've probably ridden those climbs, hundreds of times now across my cycling lifespan so far. So they do hold a special place in my heart. Yeah. If someone was to take them back in Australia, or if someone was to take them just down the road in Spain, I think there'd be a trip very quickly planned to go get them back.
Brilliant. All right, Jay, well, great to chat to you, mate. I'm happy we've tapped into a little bit of Strava with you, but great to chat to you about your opinion on Strava.
Cheers.
All right. Now it's time to talk to a pro and understand, do pros actually use Strava? Because it's this thing that was created, I guess, for, as we've heard, for the every Joe Blow. But, it's integrating, or it's sort of, getting into it with the pro Peloton. I'm talking with George Bennett. He's an old pro, but he's actually, from what I understand, a bit of a Strava man. George, mate, welcome to the pod.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I guess the question is, do you use Strava?
I do use Strava, but with many caveats, many apostrophes beside I do use Strava. And I like Strava. It's actually been a great tool, especially for me, because I'm a bit of a gypsy. I live in Andorra. I'm sometimes in Girona. I'm in New Zealand. I go to Australia. I go to training camps. I go everywhere around the world. And now I can get somewhere and go, where am I riding? And this is what I love Strava for. I go, right, I got 3 by 10 minute efforts. I need to find a 10-minute hill. Well, that hill, is it 10 minutes? Let's find out. Some guys got it. You can look on the comms. You can look at the percentage. You can unlock a lot of doors through Strava. So in that sense, yes, I do use Strava. For me, it's this amazing exploratory tool. On the other hand, I don't necessarily know if I love a lot of the other things that come with Strava.
Right. Like what?
I guess Strava gets under my skin a little bit as an old pro, like you say. As an old pro. And I definitely got a bit of a chip on my shoulder about how I turned pro, Like I had this crazy long story. That's for another pod, Battling through French amateurs, battling through crazy situations, living abroad, crying myself to sleep, just suffering.
Doing it the old school way. It's the path, the path not really travelled anymore.
No. I suffered it out for years as an amateur, got my break, won races in France, got signed up, lived strong, straight away pro. So and that whole time I was thinking, man, that was a horrific, traumatic few years, but it was the best few years of my life. You know what I mean? In terms of growing as a person, learning to race a bike. And for that reason, I can be at the front of a bike race, like the cobble stage on the tour. I was right in the front group as a climber before I crashed out, because you'd learned to race. You can be at the
because
front
you're hardened.
and
You're ready. Exactly.
Yeah.
You're ready to take on whatever comes at you. You're not softened at the first blow. You just go, oh, it's all too hard. You've made it through the hard spot. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here.
And you can fight, like me and you, we've had plenty of coming together in a bike race, and both of us know how to push each other around. And that's because I made it pro in a certain way. And I've got a lot of respect for guys coming up to that way. And also it's taught me to live away from home and all the other things come with it. So a little bit of me gets quite pissed off when I see a bloke getting a Strava record and people going, man, this guy must be a good cyclist. And people confusing the fact that I really hate the confusion between this guy's a good cyclist or this guy can go fast up a hill. And I think they're distinctly different things. I remember a few years ago in Girona, there was this, people getting Stravas and tweeting at team managers going, I've got this Strava, you should sign me. How can you not sign me? I've got this Strava. And me, that just blowing my mind going, getting a Strava is miles apart from being a pro cyclist. I think it's an awesome tool for amateurs to go, right, bit of comparison, get them out the door, give them a goal to work to, give them an idea of, okay, this guy can climb it. But I mean, it spiraled into this ridiculous thing where people thought this is the route to pro. And they would go out to a hill with race wheels on, take their bottles off, take the saddlebag off, get a lead out, and just, take a Strava and then think that transforms into being a good cyclist.
Well, explain to everyone out there who doesn't understand you and I, who hasn't been in the Peloton and can't distinguish the difference between taking a comm up a famous climb in Girona called Emir, and then suddenly racing Vuelta Catalunya and just say there was a hilltop finish up Emir, and then suddenly not being in the front. They're like, well, hang on a second. I've got the fastest time up this climb. How come I'm not winning the stage up Emir in Vuelta Catalunya? What's the key difference there for everyone listening, for someone who's been in the Peloton and knows the difference that, yes, of course, you need to have the ability to take a Strava, but you need to combine that with the racecraft as well and the hardness mentally, like you spoke about earlier. Is that all it is? What is it?
No, I mean, okay, all those things, of course. But there's also go do a Strava or go do 3.5 hours full gas and then see what you've got left. There's a physical side of it. I mean, that's huge, So they talk about in training your decay or your repeatability or your, even my coach, John Wakefield, he uses a great metric where he talks about, performance after a certain amount of KJs, and so a lot of my training is based on that, and even my training's changed in the last few years, or in the last year, this year particularly, whereas before I was doing 20 minutes, we can do a 20-minute test fresh at 6.8, 6.9, you might even get 6.9 on a good day. I'm crazy fast. You don't get ever get even close to that in a race. I think a 20-minute power, you might do 6.4, 6. Maybe you're losing 20, 30 watts in a race, but most people are losing 60 to 100 watts. You know what I mean? So there's this massive decay that goes on physically. The other thing is, yeah, sure, you can be the fastest up the hill in a race. Good on you. Doesn't help if you start 2 minutes behind everybody else because you couldn't get to the front. And the front group, you start at the back, the front group's already gone. I mean, look at Flanders, great example, You imagine coming into the Mur in 120th wheel and think you're going to make front group. You can go as fast as you like up the Mur. You won't make a front group.
In saying all that, and going off what you said at the start, you are a fan of Strava. So why have you then now converted and decided to use Strava after saying all that?
There's many reasons, but ultimately, why are we pro cyclists, right? What's our actual job, And essentially, we're entertainment. We're entertainment for the masses. I often look at our job and go, man, do we actually do anything good? And you go, well, you want to make yourself feel better, maybe you inspire people to ride a bike. Okay, well, great. I love looking at where people ride, and I'm lucky because I love riding my bike. If my dream training week would be a 30-hour week with 6-hour rides. Just go explore. Just don't do efforts. Just go ride around.
Yeah,
it's never like that. That's not how I work. But I wish it was like that sometimes. I love being out and I love finding new roads and small roads and stuff. So if you can put a Strava ride up and someone goes, man, that's a cool lap, through Andorra through the mountains on this, small roads down in actual terms, and people, that inspires someone to ride a bike. Sure, it's great. I think that's one valid reason to put it up. I also think for me, finding new roads like we talked about, but also I don't think I would put many Stravas up, like let's say of high performance stuff. I know like a guy like Kudos, he just puts everything up.
So you're scared to show your data?
I'm not scared to. I like the idea sometimes of just disappearing, going off the grid. And I like it that no one, sometimes depends what mood I'm in. If I'm just chill, here's my rides, data on, don't care, But sometimes I like to just disappear. Sometimes things aren't going well. Currently, things aren't going well. I've just left the tour with COVID. Nobody knows if I'm riding my bike or not. I don't know if I'm going to get back to form, or I've had a lot of time off. I don't know what the rest of the year has in store for me. The rest of this year could go one or two ways. I could either make some storming comeback and have a crack at the Vuelta, or I might do 2 more race days and that's it. And currently nobody knows because I haven't put my Strava online.
Do you think that's sometimes the best and worst thing with Strava? Because I've fallen then into a bit of a trap now as an amateur, or as a non-professional. Well, I guess it's an amateur, isn't it? Just an every Joe blow, because suddenly now I'm feeling the pressure of my Strava results when I go out running. That the world's watching. They can't see me run under over a 5-minute K because I've set this unrealistic level of myself that I think everyone cares about. And like what you just said, you think everyone's watching to see what you're doing, and like suddenly you feel this pressure that if it's not a good enough performance for the world to see, I'm not going to put it up. It's a bit of a weird conundrum, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I look at how slow I'm riding right now. I am shit ass, I've done 10 days off the bike or 8 days off the bike, and I'm jumping back on a bike and I'm going, do I want the world to see this? I'm up in Andorra because it's too hot in Girona and this and that. And I'm going, oh shit, I want the world to see this. But I mean, I'm also not the kind of guy where, you get those guys that are just world to see, great. And they would actually find it motivational to have the world cheering them on. Because ultimately, we're all paranoid and we think people care about how fast we're riding, whereas they don't, And
that's right.
And maybe people would use it as a motivational tool to be like, I could imagine you put your comeback, let's say the comeback from COVID, and putting it out to the world is a really motivational thing, and people sending messages of support like, mate, great to see you back on the bike, hopefully, and people get a lot of energy from that. I like a little bit sometimes to just disappear from the radar, pop up at a bike race, and then go, shit, we didn't think about them. We thought he had COVID and thought he was out of the picture.
Well, what about the pros then? Like, what's the view in the Peloton? Because, like, let's think back to Milan-San Remo 2016. Arnaud Dumas, it actually came around and bit him in the ass because he held onto a car going up the Poggio, and his Strava account, he stupidly uploaded his file, and they've seen, hang on a second, you've averaged up the climb 52k an hour up the Poggio. So clearly he cheated. That's fair dinkum. So what's the view of the pros? In my opinion, I never had a Strava account until I stopped being professional. You've clearly got one, you're pro. What do the other guys think?
Mixed bag, like a lot of guys just, the races, they chuck them up, whatever, but it's normally like George Bennett rode with this bloke and 104 others, so everyone's like, oh yeah, whatever. And it's just a little bit of that, like, how like I'm quite cautious of not seeking. You don't want to seek comments. You don't want to intentionally seek kudos. You know what I mean? Yeah. And kudos is actually like Strava actually calls it kudos. But you know what I mean? So how people like something goes wrong and they might put it on Instagram looking for sympathy. It's that feedback loop of, if a race goes well, or badly or whatever, guys put it up maybe to get a little bit of play on the ego. But if, like you say, this kicked the guy in the ass. Do you know what's also interesting with this is, how they do the calculations on Strava, on Twitter, there's this Finnish guy, he's always doing calculations and he's like, oh my God, they climbed I saw a great calculation the other day. They climbed 6.8 watts a kilo on the end of the Granon. And I know all the data because I'm either in the race or my coach is there or, whatever. And I'm knowing, nah, mate, they just had a tailwind. But you don't want to shatter the illusion that you were doing 6.5 watts a kilo for this climb when you were doing 6, and everyone's going, man, these pros are going so fast. And you're like, well, if I upload this with data, they're going to know that I just had a tailwind. Or, you know, or what about motorbikes? This is the other thing that's crazy, right? Motorbikes have been getting more and more into races, and they're getting out of control. I mean, Dauphiné this year, they were taking the piss. I remember the breakaway. We had Ghana averaging 480 watts for 32 minutes, normalized 482 watts. We didn't catch the break. We caught them like 50 meters to go in this crazy sprint. They were still running top 10 to sprint the break. And he was just like, this is bullshit. You know, he put his file up, and, you know, and then if someone from the breakaway puts their file up and they realize they were averaging 250 watts, but they were still on a motorbike, you know?
Well, finally, then, let's talk about outside of the race and comms. Taking comms, going for the KOM, that is, something that I know you've gone for. What are the tricks of the trade? And, you know, tell me about anyone out there thinking about doing it. I want to know what an old school pro, what's his tricks of the trade about trying to take a comm? Is it just purely down to how good you are? Is there little, you know, secrets you can do? Like you said, taking the bid and the, not the bid and cages off, but taking the saddlebag off, you know, hitting it with a tailwind. What are the tricks of the trade when you're going for those KOMs?
I think you could do all that stuff. I mean, I'm not actually, I've only ever gone for one in my life, and that was with the help of some friends. And that was actually to, you know, make a point about that, you know, if you own a comm, you shouldn't necessarily be pro. So we had to take a comm. We had to just right some wrongs, let's say. And so I've never really actively sought a comm. But what I would say is you need a good day, weather-wise, and you need, if I was going to say it's like pacing, you know, in terms of if I was going to pace a TT, the steeper parts, you need to push harder. The flatter bits, you need to get up to speed, and then you need to recover. You know, but once you're up to speed, it's all about speed. At the end of the day,
forget about the watts.
Far more important than, it's not average power, it's average speed. So you need to attack the steep parts harder. You need to get up to speed on the flatter bits, recover, because you can push 100 watts more on the, if you try and ride completely even the whole way, you might be pushing 100 watts extra on this flat bit and only get an extra couple of K an hour out of it. Whereas if you go 100 watts extra on a steep bit, you might get 5K an hour out of it. You know, you need to apply your power well. And if that fails, just get behind the motor.
Perfect, mate. Well, thanks for that, George. We've got an insight to an old school pro and Strava. Now, what did you think? Did you learn something? What did you think what the pros thought? And Jay Vine, it was really, really interesting to hear what he said about taking those comms over there in Girona and what they actually, the impact of that in terms of helping him turn pro, I guess in a way. I found it really interesting. I especially love talking to Marco. He's just this wealth of knowledge back here in Australia. He's a great guy. And actually, Mark O'Brien is going to be joining us on Talking Luft next week. We sat down at the infamous Iron Bar. If anyone in Melbourne would know that, that is a famous bar out where my old man lives. And we had a cold beer and we did some Talking Luft. That will be next week. Guys, I've got to say thanks to Lara behind the scenes, who's helping me put this podcast together this year, doing all the nuts and bolts behind the scenes. Will Jones, who's piecing these episodes together. But of course, last but not least, Rapha, who, like I said, this episode is about community. It's about Strava, helping people to connect online. But that is what Rapha are doing. That's their ethos, about trying to make people fall in love with cycling through the RCC, through the clips that they do, Rapha Gone Racing. You know that. And I'm loving working with them on Life in the Peloton. I guess another tool to make people fall in love with cycling. It makes sense, doesn't it? And guys, you guys for listening too. Send in your feedback. I always love hearing from you. And guys, until next week, cheers. The music in this episode was composed by Pete Shelley. Cheers, mate.